Before we get into today's interview, I want to remind everybody to go and support our partners in safety. They help make this podcast possible. Of course, I'm talking about Mighty Line Floor Tape. If you have issues in your facilities with layout, organization, maybe it's causing safety concerns, Mighty Line has you covered. You can 5S your entire facility without having to paint any of your floors. They have floor marking tape, they have logos. You can make custom signs with your logos. You've got all kinds of floor marking, directional arrows, signs. You want the little footprints on your floor to show people where to walk. They've got that stuff too. They've got grip tape. They've got line tape that is built to withstand forklift traffic. Look, don't take my word for it. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Get a free sample of their floor tape today. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Next up, we have Aero Safety. Aero Safety has been a supporter of the podcast for a long time. I've gotten to know Drew Hinton over there at Aero Safety. We've had Drew on several times on the podcast, and hope to have him back soon as well. We talk about a lot of safety management stuff, and we talk about all kinds of topics that are important to safety managers. One thing that you want to concern yourself with is if you have a need for any kind of support, whether it's written program development, audits, inspections, training for your workers, Aero Safety is going to be the one you want to call. They're going to customize an approach that fits your business needs, not some canned generic training or three-ring binder off the shelf and hand it off to you like it's your own safety program. It's going to be something that is designed specifically based on your needs. Aero has you covered with all of that stuff. Go to aerosafetyus.com and get a custom quote today. Again, go to aerosafetyus.com.
All right, welcome back to the Safety Pro podcast. Alex, once again, you've become a regular, you and your people. I just recently
always happy to be here.
Oh, yeah. I recently talked to Ken about a good topic that we saw on LinkedIn that he was getting people all riled up about. This is another one that for some reason, it either trips up safety professionals, even seasoned safety professionals, but it certainly is throws business operators, managers for a loop, because we think that we have to do something, and that is cases where injury, illness cases where there might not be a whole lot the company can do. And so what kind of cases are we talking about? How do we refer to these cases?
We typically refer to them as waste of time or nothing more to learn.
Nothing more to learn. It's probably a little more business-like.
I like the waste of time personally because everyone, especially safety professionals, but we've all got a limited amount of resources. Yeah. There's no company that just has extra people all the time and they could do anything. Well, most of the time we're low on resources. We don't have enough time in the day. And so you got to pick your battles. What do you want to spend your time? Do you want to spend it on the important things that are going to prevent injuries, or are you going to spend it on chasing down stuff that probably will never happen again? Or if it does, do you care?
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of things that you've got to balance as a company, is starting to think, when we think of risk, when we think of, is this worth doing?
Now, you're touching on something and I think that is the root of, no pun intended here, the root of the problem is that we've done, I don't know if it's good or bad, it just is, but I'll say we've done a good job, speaking for my profession, of instilling in the business that anybody coming into work and getting injured in any way is not a good thing. 100%.
I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. the question, the taboo that we want to address is, are there injuries, or I won't say injuries because that's really the result, the end result of what we're looking at. Are there incident cases that we get to a point where there isn't anything we could have done or we could do going forward that would do anything? And how do we know? How do we get there?
So I think first, and we want to state this at the beginning, that there are regulatory requirements
Yes.
that oftentimes get us into these situations where someone was injured, they're an employee, they're at a job site, whatever it is, and we have a reporting requirement. And so because we have that reporting requirement, there is also tied to this often a investigation requirement, a report out requirement, a we've got to do something, right? If somebody gets injured, we've got to do something. And that mindset is a good one. It's one that you want to encourage in a business, because if somebody's getting hurt on the job, you want to change something so that they don't get hurt in the future. So I think you have to state that at the front, that we want you to do investigations, but there are types of injuries, there are types of, we'll say, series of events that are, we'll say, maybe luck-based or are not that serious. It's not, yes, someone got injured, but it's not really worth the company's effort to do something about this in the future to prevent it.
So let's use an example to kick us off, and we'll probably have a couple of examples to give sort of a variety of instances that could go in different directions. So I love that you started with, yes, there's a regulatory reporting. So in the United States, we'll reference OSHA. So you could have an injury that just results in just minor treatment, a Band-Aid, you move on. There's, OSHA, you're not going to put it on your OSHA log of recordable injuries and illnesses. And that's usually what triggers businesses to do a little bit more, right? And I would argue that even first aids and near misses, we need to deep dive to determine if the severity could have been such that we needed to do something, or if there's something we could have done to prevent it. But let's just start with, it's an OSHA recordable. So that means they're going to get medical treatment beyond first aid. And we'll just start there. Forget whether or not they have restrictions or lost time. They're going to get medical treatment beyond first aid, which is going to, at a minimum, get it on the OSHA log as a medical case, a medical treatment. Okay. So now everybody's like, okay, we got to deep dive this, because that's usually our policy. And we have to meet the regulatory requirements for filling out an accident report, because it's going to go on the OSHA log. We have to have an accompanying accident report. Let's say a worker is just walking. They're walking to the break room. And they're walking. They're going to go. They got their lunchbox in their hand. And they're a happy little worker. They're fine. They're doing just fine. Just trips over their own 2 feet. Nothing wrong with the floor. The floor's not cracked. It's not slippery. It was well lit. Just literally, we've all been there, by the way. I've done it in my own house. And they just trip over their own 2 feet and fall down and injure their knee. The doctor says, treats them and diagnoses them, and now it's on the OSHA log. And you go to look at this, and you see video, and you interview. Let's just go from there. Give me an example of how we might get to a point where there's nothing more to learn, and how do we get there?
So I think you stated a couple things right off the bat that you need to understand. When you have someone injured, you've got to investigate originally. You've got to get some information. So you mentioned things like the floor condition. Was it wet? Was it slick? Was there something they tripped over, right? We want to get information of what happened. So with us, we originally had a 7-step major investigation process. It was just the 7-step TapRooT process.
Yeah.
Back in 2016, we released the low to medium risk model. And that had a off-ramp for stopping an investigation. So
Right.
there's nothing more to learn. But that came after the snap chart. You still had to collect information and understand what happened. Because if you don't know what happened, you can't make this decision on if there's an opportunity to learn or not. So we take this tripping over the foot example. We know someone tripped. When you're starting, you get the call, so-and-so tripped over, got injured. Maybe it was a Saturday work shift, right? And so you were at home, you're getting the call on Saturday. You got to run out there and get information. And they say, oh, we took him down over to this dock. And so you go, I got to drive over there. And once you're there, that's when you start that questioning process, getting information, understanding what happened. Now, pretty quickly with some of these lower risk stuff, you kind of can get a feeling. So, you're talking to the guy, yeah, I tripped. And you go, was it slick? No, it wasn't slick. Did you trip on something? Like, you're just trying to understand, and they're going to give you information. Now, the difference comes in when you get that information. Is it something that you can learn from? So for us, we do causal factor analysis on this, which helps us look for what mistakes, errors, equipment failures occurred. And that helps us make decisions on, is this something that's preventable that we have control over as a company? So I'll give you like a contrasting example. You've got somebody that was just walking and they tripped over their own feet. Well, if you have a slightly different scenario where maybe there was the floor cleaning driver just went by and they have a wet, slick floor and now it's break time and he drove right past the break room right at break time and there was no signage, nothing like that. They just walk in there and a bunch of people slip.
Yep.
Well, you've now got a condition that was created, a hazard that was created, if you will. And so this is something now your company can go, ooh, we have control over these kinds of things. So that's something where you want to look at, do you have control over this mistake? Is this something that you can change or behavior? So you have to make some things like those questions help understand if you want to move forward. That would be an example for the slip. But I think there's a lot more severe examples that people come across where they have to make these kind of decisions. And I think tripping over a foot's a pretty obvious one of, hey, is this really something worth my time writing corrective action for people tripping over their foot? Probably not. But if you look at something more severe, when, we had a case of a finger that had to be majorly treated and it was almost amputated. It wasn't, but they had to do all this treatment and prevent amputation because they had a splinter. They got a splinter on the job and we didn't remove it. They didn't even tell us about it. And it was like 3 or 4 days later, it got reported. And suddenly now we're dealing with, all these complications that occurred because they had a sliver. I don't remember if it was 3. It might have been a week later. It was reported later, though. And it ended up with an infection in the finger and some extra complications occurred. And those kind of things where suddenly it's like, oh, severity, a potential amputation of a finger that's pretty severe, at least for most organizations. So there can be things like that where you have to go, oh, is there an opportunity for learning in this? You'd think a splinter is not a big opportunity for learning, but there's always things that you can from a reporting. How did we find out about these things? How did we report?
Why didn't we know about it immediately?
Why didn't we?
Absolutely, there's something to learn from those. That's a great example. So going back to the snap chart, like, and from what I'm hearing, and obviously TapRooT, you have this snap chart, but for anybody listening, is what you're saying this, and I call it context, and that's just me. Mm-hmm. You've got to get the who, what, when, where, and I just stop at the how and why, because in order for me to understand how and why something happened, I need to understand what happened, where was it, who was involved, what were they doing, that kind of stuff. So I call it context. I've got to start to develop the context piece. This is something you have to do every single time the same way. It's always going to start the same way. Is that a fair generalization?
Yeah, I think there are for us, it's very much like there's a difference between an initial snap chart and a completed snap chart. And so it's somewhere along that pipeline. Sometimes it's you just got to get those initial facts and you can see, hey, this is not something we're going to be spending a lot of resources on.
Yeah.
But other times, you've got to really dig to uncover opportunity.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a level as a company that you have to do that initial fact finding. A lot of times
they're all going to start with that. Like, I just got to get the basic stuff going.
Yep.
At least. And that's what I'm getting at is, yes, everyone should start at the same spot, even if it takes that quick to spiral, or it takes you a little.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of companies they'll have like an incident form or something that they fill out. Maybe the supervisor that was there fills it out. It's just something to get enough information to see and get a feel for the incident, what really happened. Now, you may not know a lot of the intimate details, but at least you got to get that initial picture and get some of those facts before you can ever make that decision of stopping an investigation.
I'll give you another one. Same scenario. Trips over their own 2 feet. Through talking with the individual, you go out to where it happened, you take photos of the floor, the conditions at the time, you kind of rule out wet floor, poor lighting, and everything, and you find out they've got these lace-up boots, ankle mid-rise, not like construction boots, but mid-rise, right? Shoes, and the top two lace-ups aren't eyelets. They're these little hook things where you actually loop the laces around these hooks and cinch them tight. And then you tie your shoes, and now you've got this loop, and that loop caught on the other shoe's hook. Does that make sense? Are you following me on these? Yeah. And they tripped. I'm probably going to get a chuckle from somewhere down the hall. My wife has done this, I don't know how many times, with her hiking boots. And of course, my first reaction is like, stop buying those.
Or tuck your shoelaces.
But see, then they come out like, I was like that. You tuck them in your sock, but they always come loose, and that elimination, right? Like, don't buy them. Just do not get them. Let's say the company finds out, so these are shoes. Now the next question would be, well, can we control that? These were safety shoes approved by the company, listed on the portal where employees get their free safety shoes. Okay, maybe there's something we can do. Is that an example where we're starting to move the needle from nothing we could practically control to maybe we could probably eliminate at least that case?
So you could. Now there is a caveat, and especially when we think about these kinds of incidents, what we always look at is we think of a risk profile.
Yep.
You've got probability and consequence. What is the likelihood of this happening again? And what is the consequence if it does? And when you're going to be starting to do this, a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll set up a good criteria. What was the potential? What was the potential severity, potential harm? And when somebody trips over their shoe, there's a lower level, but then you think of like, well, what if they fell down the stairs? What if you could work your way into this being a higher potential? Yeah.
So you're bringing up something else, and I bet you we could pull another podcast episode out of this one. And people conflate this. I love the 3D matrix. I don't like the 2D. It's because our world is
simple risk matrix. Yeah.
Yeah. There is and I know I'm going to be accused of being a word nerd here, and I hate word nerds. I even rant about it. But there is a distinction worth noting. There's a difference between probability and likelihood. One's looking forward, trying to predict the future. The other one is looking backwards based on historical data. You have to do both. So your example of what's the probability of this happening? Let's say we move forward, and say, well, what if we do the what if? What if they were going down the stairs? We don't have stairs in our facility. Like, so
yeah.
But that's exactly
It's
what
got to
you
match.
need
It's
to
got to
do.
match with your company, because every company's got their own. I've had companies that their biggest risk is not a person falling down the stairs is a high risk for them, right? That's the highest risk they're going to typically deal with in a day. There's other things too, but most of that's mitigated already.
Yeah. So I think people's inclination to go to worst case scenario is natural.
Yep.
Dude, adults aren't supposed to be falling on concrete in a building. That's bad. Like, you could die. Like 30,000 people a year die from accidental falls and accidents in the home every year, right? So you could make the argument that's dangerous. But if you go with how likely is it based on our data in our business and even in the industry, the majority of people that just fall, it's minor stuff. Maybe you'll get a broken wrist. I've had those cases, and they do happen. But if you run the numbers actuarially, right, that's where you have to get to a really good grade on your matrix. Is that
so? I would tell you, if you're the kind of company that is, worth investigating because somebody you don't have that many accidents, you want to keep your skills up, so you want to do some practice. Then go ahead, do the full investigation. But a lot of companies that would be considered minor, somebody tripping over, and it's not worth their resources because their resources are spent doing other things. So even if you might have had an opportunity, like, hey, they got caught on the shoe and we provide the shoe, there is an opportunity where we could change something, but it's just as likely that the different shoe that they had could have had the same result. And just by changing the shoe, have you really prevented it? Well, maybe, but also maybe this is a 1 in a million happenstance of catching. And so you've got to make some base on risk and what your company's risk tolerance is and what their likelihood. So, I've had clients that, they have a very high risk profile. So they've stopped doing investigations on almost anything minor, even if it is, certain types of recordables. They only look at the probability of severity or the potential severity, and looking at what is the energy present enough to kill someone. Then we're going to do the investigation. Whether it was a minor or major injury to the person, we're going to do that. Near miss, precursor, whatever you want to call them. So that would be like, you could give people criteria and say, you do this based on potential. So that's one way you could guide people on if you want to do this investigation or not. The other way would be just based on what they uncover. So that would be like, hey, is there any opportunity at all to learn from this?
Yeah. I think a lot of companies are in that boat. Once they figure out, or once they learn, this was something, the needle moved from something that was intrinsic with the individual that we can't control. And I don't mean fatigue or distraction. Those are things that we want to get our arms around. But like I said, like somebody who's just what do you call clumsy, right? Yeah. Like everybody else was walking and just fine, but this one person trips over, like just hits their feet. Maybe they're pigeon-toed. I don't know, something like that. It's like, well, we can't issue orthopedic, corrective braces or something. Like have Forrest Gump, right, running around.
So I think you got to be careful too, because you don't want to set your criteria on, I'll call it a blame mindset. Right. I know it's not what you're intending, but if you think of it like, if I can pin it on individual factor, right? Some people will call it a human factor, human error, then I don't have to investigate it because it was that person's problem. We don't want to do that. We want to look at something a little bit more of potential, more of can we control these things? So I think to move off of like just tripping, because again, I think people come into these, I'll give a very common car accidents. Car
Yeah.
accidents get investigated all the time, and about half of them I found with talking with clients, it's like, is this really something you're going to control as a company, or are you just doing this because your insurance?
It's the number one cause of fatalities across all industries and workplace fatalities across all industries.
Because they're driving a company vehicle.
Because we all drive. Yes.
So I'll state this: when I look at car accidents, I look at two things, which is one, is this the driver's fault? We'll put it at the police level of driver's fault. So we had a client. They called us up. They had a fatality they were investigating, and they were asking for advice. And what had happened was the person had a company vehicle. They were driving into the site in the morning, and they were sitting at a red light, and they got hit by a drunk driver. And it killed not only the driver, but I think they had two other people in the car who were I think they were going to a training or something. It wasn't our training, but they were going to some training, and they had a car hit and killed the individuals in the car. Terrible. Now, everybody was wearing their seatbelt. Everything in the vehicle was working properly, but they were killed because of that drunk driver basically coming into their lane. I don't remember exactly what happened, run a red light or some turn or something, but they hit the car. Now, as a company, do you really have any control over this situation? No. And they were struggling because they're like, what are we going to do? We've claimed this as fatality and we're trying to do an investigation. There's nothing in our hands here. So a lot of those accidents, and I'll use the word accident versus incident in this case, a lot of the car accidents are out of company's control, and you got to step back and say, hey, is this something we have control over? Now, I've seen other ones where it's like, oh, we backed up into a post. We backed up into things. And my first question for them is always, do you have backup cameras? And they're like, no, we talked about it, but we didn't do it. And it's like, well, okay, you're going to back into stuff if you don't have something to stop them. Backup sensors and cameras they're going to work. But just telling people to be careful backing up.
It's cheaper than a second person going with them to spot them every time they got to go back up.
Yeah. Well, my sister, her first vehicle, she goes to pick up the tags. She goes in, gets the tags, puts in the car, backs up out of the dealership, backs into a car in the dealership.
Oh my gosh.
Her first vehicle. Like, she's 16. That's like she's the first day driving by herself kind of thing, backs into a car.
I'm guessing this was years ago that backup cameras weren't required in all new vehicles.
This car did not have them.
Okay.
And I think it was what year was that Mazda? It was a 2003 or something.
Okay.
But anyway, we had an old Mazda 3. So we did, after that, we had a corrective action after that, which was we did backup training. And that involved me going to an old abandoned Kmart parking lot. And I spent probably 3 hours doing backup driving. And when I eventually did collision avoidance training later in my life, I was like 18, for insurance, to get a lower insurance rate. I did the cop test, and the cop was like, you're the best backup driver I've ever seen. It's like, well, I had to do a lot of backup driving as a result for a corrective action of my sister's accident. So I'm pretty good at backing up a car nowadays. But
we used to goal. I posted about this recently. GOAL, like get out and look. Like, just that's an old trucker's trick, right? Get out and look, get back in. There was a case. It was a fire department in a municipality. They backed up an engine into somebody's car, a personal vehicle, a citizen, just out wandering around. And it was at a shopping mall area. The crew was stopping to get lunch, and they went to back the engine up. Yeah. And I probably shouldn't say this. So I was a consultant at the time, and this was the person who got backed into. They contacted the fire department. And they were like, eminent domain, that's on you. And they're like, no, you were No. So one, they violated their own protocol. There is a policy at the fire department, and I know this because I was a firefighter. Different department. This wasn't where I worked. They are required to get out and have a backer every single time because there's no cameras. You can't see.
And those are big vehicles. They're just big vehicles.
They didn't have a backer in the security camera outside the restaurant, the little strip mall, little restaurant. I think it was like a B-Dubs or something. It shows the operator just getting in the engine, and it just backs up and hits this car and just didn't even have a backer. So they were able to show like, okay, negligence. You didn't follow your own policy. But to your point, I also love how you had to explain that it was an old and abandoned Kmart parking lot. You could have just said Kmart parking lot.
Wow. Abandoned Kmart.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit redundant, but
it was recently after. I feel like it was recently after when Kmart
recently
went down.
enough, it was worth noting. Okay,
yeah. It's gone now. It used to be a Knoxville spot. I remember it right across from the high school, so I remember that parking lot well because we did a lot of parking training in there.
So that's a great example, even like backing in, but to your point, if you always start with this managed, repeatable process, you're more likely to get to something that off ramp, there's nothing more to learn. And we've proved it, right? That we've documented it and we've proved it. We've eliminated these other things. We've got photos, we've documented, or same thing. We've got photos, we've documented, we've looked into policies, we've done interviews, and we're going to keep going. There's something you'll get a feel for okay, we're on to something, or could be.
So when you can look at an incident and it makes it, you really scratch your head oh man, there's really no mistakes here, right? Everybody did the things they were supposed to do, and this incident resulted. Now that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do for corrective actions. A lot of times there's still opportunities. Like you said, we can still do elimination. We recognize the new hazard. But, a lot of times when we look at the difference between something that you can actually go and investigate and gather more information on versus there's no opportunity here. Swapping away from people, we look at equipment example.
Yeah.
A common one that comes up is equipment failure. Now, sometimes if you look at equipment distribution of how it fails, there's some equipment that fails after a certain amount of hours. There's some equipment that it's either going to fail in the first day or it's going to fail in 30 years, right? There's kind of a U-shaped curve on failure there for that. And then there's some types of equipment that's sporadic and random. And when you're collecting information on the equipment side, again, can you turn it off and turn it on is a common way of knowing, do you actually know if you have a repeatable problem? So I'll give an example today. Currently in my car, there is a buzzing sound. Haven't figured out what it is yet because it only appears at a certain speed. And I don't know if that's just wind or something else that's causing it. I don't know what it is yet. I've been doing a little troubleshooting, but I haven't found it yet. And it's one of those things of I'm going through my checklist of what I think it could be. But
right.
If you can't turn it back on and off, it's hard to learn something from it. We had one where a breaker flipped and it caused lights to be out, which caused someone to make a mistake and get injured. And you're trying to investigate this breaker issue, and you go back and turn the breaker on and it doesn't trip again. And you're going there with a little, heat gun thing looking for heat sources, nothing's showing up. And so you have no idea why it tripped, but it did. And so there's opportunities like that as well where you go, oh, we found something that happened that did lead to a problem, but there's nothing we're going to get from this, at least right now. We'll document it. We can reference it if something happens in the future, for maintenance records and things. But at this point, we're stuck.
Yeah.
So you have those opportunities. Equipment can come up as well. It's not just people that, make these mistakes. You also can look at equipment and say, hey, what information, what can I track down? What can I troubleshoot? And you might come to a dead end for some spurious kind of things. There's lots of random failure of spurious failures.
Yeah. I also like the low effort type of matrix, low, medium, high. I call it a 3-option approach. This is going to be very expensive, time-consuming, laborious. It's going to be somewhere in the mid, it's going to take some resources, and then of course you got low, the solve, the fix. So going back to the shoes, for example, well, maybe we didn't anticipate that. That's an insane thing to try to catch on a hazard assessment.
Yeah,
Who's doing a hazard assessment on shoes, right? But now we know, and then anecdotally, like I brought up, my wife's done it several times. She was on a hiking trail, and she hit her head pretty good. And she's done it multiple times. The same thing, this loop of her lace hooking on that hook. And I'm like, my hiking boots don't have that. I won't buy them for that reason. And if you do happen to scrape your inner leg or ankle or your calf getting over a rock, or when you go hiking a lot, you figure out these things. I've cut my leg on that stupid thing. I don't know why they make them, but they do. So it's pretty low effort, or maybe a minimal effort to say, all right, we're just going to eliminate that style. We've got a bunch of other safety shoes that are approved. We're going to eliminate that style. It's pretty easy to just delist it. And then maybe we just do, hey, if your shoes have this hook, FYI, this could happen. I mean, you're not going to be able to inspect. I wouldn't go that far of turn in your shoes and.
Yeah, I mean, it's low enough risk that it's
right.
If you delist the next year, they'll all have different shoes, and you'll probably fix it.
So that's a great example of saying, okay, minimal effort, nothing more. But now we know it can happen to a certain amount of the population. Sure, okay, it's easy enough to turn that off, delist it, move on. But then, you're right. Some things are wow, if this one little thing, highly unlikely it's going to happen again. And if it does, historically, we've got data, it's probably not, it's not worth the squeeze, right? Is one of those things.
And there's certainly things of, are we going to redesign our entire system to prevent this? This comes up a lot when you talk about elimination and substitution.
Right?
For those two, because it's okay, well, we could use this different, but in order to do this, it's going to take $500,000 of redesign. And you're like, oh, for somebody that cut their finger, we're going to,
at this one location, we have X number of locations, exactly. Right? Yeah.
So there's things like that too that, it just doesn't make sense to do those. And that's where people use other techniques where they're going to do, okay, we'll do guards, we'll do training, we'll do rules. All of those are going to require some amount of effort to make sure that they stay and stick, work. But yeah, I tend to think, get back on our topic of, is it worth investigating or not? You've got to understand what happened. And there's some criteria you have to give people, whether that's risk, whether that is, severity, whether that is potential severity. You've got to give criteria, because some things are not worth doing more than reporting. You should report everything. You should document and possibly trend it, but maybe it's not worth writing corrective actions over. So having that as an opportunity for people is valuable when it comes to investigations.
That's why I love we're talking about multiple pieces, and this is a great, man, I hate that this is going to sound like a pitch, but it's a pitch for a process, not so much a product. It's a pitch to establish a process. Everything matters, and this is the way I look at it. Something doesn't go as you would expect it to go, or according to a plan. Either one. Something's like, oh, well, that shouldn't happen. Somebody tripping in falling down in a hallway should not happen. Everything matters until you can prove that it doesn't. Okay, how do we prove it? Well, then that gets us to, you need a process. But in that process, I love this, and you turned me on to this, by the way. have we as a business, an organization, established a definition of a root cause, for example? Let's pick on root cause.
Sure.
How important is that in this scenario to help us determine this is outside of scope or in scope, if we use those terms?
So to be philosophical, we think of your company has to have a reason it's doing an investigation. It has to understand the purpose of them. And for us, we believe the purpose of an investigation is to look for missing best practices that we can apply to prevent problems. That's what root cause analysis is. Ties in with our definition of a root cause, ties in with basically our philosophy of how we go about doing root cause analysis. So if you're looking for missing best practices you can apply, if that's what you're doing with investigations, then when you don't see a reasonable practice that you can apply, that's a good indication that this is something you don't want to be spending time on. Now, again, I put this with everything you have to do. You have to meet that regulatory requirement. You have to meet your company's requirement, but there's a freedom that you can give your people by having that be a well-defined stop point for an investigation for people. Because, I mean, we deal with incidents a lot that are minor. And I have seen good safety people that go, man, I just don't have time to do a good investigation. I have all these things I have to do, and we have all these incidents we have to deal with, and I just don't have time to do a good investigation. I can only do what I have. And so I can't do a thorough investigation. I got to just go through these. I got 5 whys to get through. That's all I got time for, these 5 whys. That's it.
I'll give you 2 whys this morning. That's all I got.
You want me to do 5 whys and 3 C's and 8 D's? I can't do that. I only got 5.
8 D's.
There's too many letters and too many stuff. I can't. So I've seen people that, and a lot of times it's because they're doing too many investigations. I'll give some example from my experience rolling out Lean. We had a site. Now, this was not my site. It was a sister site that was going through a Lean transformation. And part of it was setting up an andon system, setting up that alert system for getting resources. And they set a trigger for investigation that was like, anytime they lost a certain amount of time or product dollar amount or injury, like they had a trigger that they would do a A3 investigation, a larger investigation. And they had 400 open A3s. It was like, and this is not like a 2,000 or 10,000 person site. This is like 400 people at this facility, maybe less, maybe 300. Like, it was not a huge facility. And they had 400. It's like 1 per person. Everybody gets an A3 in the site, to do. So if you set that trigger point for doing investigations really low, you quickly overwhelm yourself. And that just means you're not going to be doing good quality. It means you're going to be getting through the paperwork as quickly as you can to get on to the next one. So I think companies need to think about what is their trigger for doing a thorough investigation and set it at a reasonable level. Now, I have seen the opposite problem as well. I've seen companies that we only investigate if somebody is a certain level of severity. Like if they die or they lose an arm or major lost time, that's when we do investigations. And it's like, okay, let's add in some more for potential severity, some precursor, because you've got capacity because you're not killing somebody every week. So you've got some capacity for doing, the potential learnings, if you will. So I think there's a sweet spot in here somewhere between, we investigate everything and we report out on it. That's probably too much. And we only investigate the highest severity things. That's probably too little. There's probably a sweet spot in there somewhere.
And is that where, and you said this was about 2016, is that when, for your case, you can come up with this off-ramp to help, like a pressure relief valve almost for incidents? Because otherwise they're doing the full Monty to get to document what they probably found out, collecting basic facts up front. Right.
Yeah, and ours came from feedback from clients because, again, a lot of our clients are using TapRooT for the highest risk. And they say, well, we want to use it for low, but we really, like there's all these steps. Well, you got snap charts and causal factors and root cause and corrective actions, and sometimes we don't need that. And so that kind of pushed us into thinking about, okay, for lower risk, do you really need to do the full investigation? And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And so we needed an opportunity to have that conversation. There's a hot debate internally. I don't say this is like a really hot debate, but there's a hot debate on when do you stop? Is it before or after causal factors? And the answer is really, it's just when you recognize there's nothing more to learn. Whether that is you've made an initial snap chart, you've still got a ton of questions, but you can just tell this is not something worth you spending a lot of resources in. Maybe it's after you've gathered a lot of information and you go, look, we're either at a stuck point or this is just such a unique chain of events. It's never going to happen again. The meteorite hit the person walking in the parking lot.
Right. Act of God. Yeah.
This is outside of what we're going to be doing. You've got those kind of things as well. And then also you go, hey, we've got these 5 mistakes that we've recognized, these 5 causal factors, but realistically, we only can control 2 of them. So we're going to do investigation on this, and we're going to let these other ones go. We're not going to put in corrective actions for them.
So it gets back to, is this something that we can control? So it gets back to that definition almost of.
Yeah, is it something we want to try to control too? Because it's a lot of times when it comes for us, when we think of causal factors, mistakes and errors, there's things that you can control, like if I've got a policy or a standard of how to do something, I can control if people follow that or not. It's a lot of work to get people to do that. We have a whole episode where we talked about that.
Right.
But, that's things you want to control. We want to make sure that people are doing things in a right way, a safe way, a controlled way. There's other things where it's like, okay, the order didn't matter. The process didn't matter. This is something that was outside of what we as a business, we're not micromanaging every single thing a person does. So I think of things like we had a case of a person that got injured, and it's like one of those that lift, like they're lifting something that shouldn't have pulled their back.
Right.
Okay, it's under the weight, it's under this. We wouldn't have expected them to get hurt. They weren't like lifting it in a bad posture or anything. It's just, there's people that get hurt doing something routine and not unexpected, but hey, that was on company property. It was they were doing the job. And so you can have those differences in there. I remember an incident. It was one of the last things I actually investigated, but when I was at work, but we had a case where, I want to say this guy was 63 years old, really experienced, really great, smart guy. And he had to step down off a platform. And we're not talking a major step. We're talking a short step. And he steps down and his knee gives out. And he reaches out. And I think we've talked about this one before. But
I think we did, yeah.
And grabs a part and pulls it down on it. And it almost breaks his leg, hits the ground, dents the concrete. And when you think about that of like, I can't control his knee giving out. As a company, we have zero control over that. And, even a young guy's knee could give out. That's not in my control. What is in my control is what's around them for them to grab, what controls the things that slide off. Those are the kinds of things that I can control, how we lock things in, what we do. I can't control the somebody's knee giving out. And so you've got to base some of your stuff on, is this something in my control? Is it not? Is this a part of the person? Is this part of the process? If it's part of the process, there's opportunity potential. So we definitely want to focus.
So like just walking to the break room and tripping over my own 2 feet.
Yep.
Once you learn, and you still have to go through this process, once you learn that there were no unique or unusual workplace environmental factors that caused them to trip, that we can control, that this was just it's life. This is just people being peopling. They were peopling. But I think that the thing though, and you said a couple of things there, setting a threshold, for example, and you got me thinking of, that's not the same as letting people just use their own judgment. they were screwing around, or they should have been paying attention. But no, it's establishing a policy, a process, and then training people, because you said a couple of other things there. When you get a sense of, and that I use this phrase all the time, there's an art and a science to this. You have to train people. And there are, just like we're talking about people, there are people that are just not, oh man, how do we say this? Not who I would pick to do. I mean, because inherent bias, they're just a certain, there's a manager, this was many, many years ago, that I worked with. It had to have been 20 years now, that, anytime something happened on their crew, this was in construction, we would just immediately go out and do it, because this individual is going to probably just fire the person for not being able to, finish the job by the end of the day or shift or whatever. They were such like a hard nose about stuff. They allowed for no mistakes, they were very, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for here, but that we can say.
They don't want to blame the individual, whether it was they're biased to those things.
Yeah, and it wasn't so that was the result. The result was they would blame them, but I don't know if I want to say old school, like, because people use old school as a pejorative, you know what I mean? And
I love my old school supervisors. They knew stuff.
And an old school captain kept
But they want to hold
and
people accountable. They want to hold people very accountable for every action they take, because it was obvious to them that they shouldn't have done it.
Right. I think the issue with this guy was, like, he didn't care. He was like, I don't care. Next, we'll hire somebody who can carry that. And it was I see if that person can't carry it, then HR screwed up, and we'll get somebody else who can carry it. I call it,
there's people that see mistakes as moral failings.
Yeah.
They try hard enough. They don't care enough. Yeah. Right. And I've fallen into that trap as a supervisor as well, where it's like, oh yeah, this person just doesn't care. They're the problem. And it's easy to fall into that as a supervisor, especially if you see somebody that's not learning from their mistakes. Like, you're like, come on, you got to learn from these. You made a mistake 3 times.
And this guy will tell you without blinking, I've done this for 30 some odd years. That never happened to me.
Yeah.
Screw those guys. They can suck it up. Bunch of babies, blah, blah, like very hard, like roughneck, like whatever. Okay. But we knew the result of that was, we cannot rely on this individual to use that judgment you were talking about. So it really is incumbent upon organizations to assess their capability to do. It's one thing to say, and it's easy for us to sit here and go, you need a process, define what it is you were looking for, have a system to be able to document this, it's repeatable, and then train everybody on how to do it, and then you just have the wrong people. Is that a thing? Is that a...
Yeah, I would say everyone has a bias, and there are some processes that are more bias-based than others.
Yes.
And so for us, you want to have a process that removes as much of that bias. But even with our process, you've got to be curious. You've got to be willing to go out and get the answers to the questions. I mean, we give you the questions to ask, but you still got to go out and get the answers. So if you have a person that already has the answers and they're not willing to go out and get them, it doesn't matter what process you give them, they are not going to follow it. They're going to do what they want. And so I think from an organization standpoint, having a good process, we can all agree you need to have a good process. Having a clear criteria for when to stop an investigation. If you're going to have stop points, that's what you should do, is set clear criteria, whether that's severity, whether that's risk, whether that's some other, we'll say more ephemeral,
right?
Good word for the day, ephemeral kind of thing, like feeling. But you should have a clear criteria for that. And then maybe have a check and balance to it as well, because
Yeah.
I think having, if it's just me, the safety guy, that makes this decision, that's probably going to result in me going, I don't want to do this today. I'm not feeling doing an investigation today. We'll fire this one off.
Hey, safety professionals are people too. We're subject to the same pressures.
Hard days and
I love that you ended on that piece, because if you get a couple, 3 sets of eyes on this, it's hard to get one passed. And if we're not cherry picking, like I'm not calling my buddy and go, hey man, sign off on this, I got stuff to do. But we take an honest approach. And I know in a previous episode, we talked about whether you want to call them learning teams or not, deep dive teams, I don't care what you call them, but you categorized these as not number of people, but types of people that should be aware of this thing going on and be able to chime in as the facilitator, the process expert, somebody with process knowledge, and somebody with practical knowledge. At least those 3 categories to start, right?
Yeah, of who should be on your team. And I think especially for if you're going to stop an investigation, you need someone leadership-wise. Yeah. Because ultimately there's a plant manager or a site manager or project manager. There's somebody in the leadership that's ultimately going to be responsible for this, thing. So they've got to you got to convince them. So there's probably an element of that as well, where you've got to provide your evidence to say, this is what we found. We don't think there's any opportunity. I'll leave you with an example of when this came up, and it was really obvious to me, but wasn't obvious to the people originally doing the investigation. They had a truck that rolled over. Now, you think of a truck that rolls over, that's worth investigating. But they get this information back, and what they found happened was this guy was driving down these narrow, winding West Virginia roads, and a school bus is coming the opposite direction. And this work truck, pulls over slightly to the edge, not off the road. They just pulled over a little bit to give the school bus room to pass, and the road caves in and they roll the truck.
So this was one of those, there's no shoulder, and I've seen this, the asphalt maybe undermining or soft, or it's thinner at the edge, and it just kind of, it sinks and causes the truck to roll.
Yeah, it just sinks in. Yeah. Just sinks it slides away at the edge of the shoulder there, and the truck rolls. And, if you're looking at this from an organizational, I don't own the road, I don't control school buses, I don't control the amount of distance off the road there is. Our vehicle fits on the road, but this driver was just trying to give room to a school bus going around these West Virginia roads. So you don't think of this as something that you're going to really do anything about. As a company, you're not like, oh, we're not going to drive during school bus hours. You're like, that seems like we're going to lose all our driving in the afternoon and in the morning. So it's like, there's something to this of like, if you're not going to do anything about it, is this worth investigating?
No more driving on that road.
The people, they thought, oh, we got a great investigation. We got to learn a lot from this. And you're like, there is not a lot to learn from this. You've got a lot of interesting facts, but the person wore their seatbelt. They didn't get injured. The car was drivable after it rolled. There's not a lot of opportunity for learning. And even if you did some advanced safeguards, let's look at our safeguards we can put in place. You're going to come up with empty hands. And so a lot of times when you get to those points, you want to recognize that, have as an organization, recognize the opportunity and say, hey, let's not waste any more of our people's time. They've got other better things they could be doing than building and writing a big report for this. Let's just simplify it, report it out, and be done with it.
And document it. And that is not the same thing as I don't care.
Yep. It's not, we proved that we got the information.
Right.
We were wanting to learn, but there wasn't an opportunity here.
Right. And I think, I do believe that is the crux of the issue when I talk to people of, there's got to be something we can do. I'm like, no, sometimes there isn't. So I'm glad that we got to crack this nut here, because it causes a lot of heartburn. People scratch their heads and go, I got to write something. And maybe that's it, because we haven't established this threshold, this stopping point, defined it, and accepted that as an organization. The organization has this open-ended expectation of, no, every incident has to have corrective and preventative actions.
And if you
that's
think about
the
that,
standard.
if I've
You're going to
got to
drive
have a
yourself
corrective
crazy.
action,
Yeah.
I have to track that.
I have to.
And I've got to get it to completion. Yeah. And we're going to find it in an audit, so we got to come back and audit it later. It's like, look, you're doing a lot of work for probably nothing.
Right.
And that's work that you could have been spending being proactive, looking for new hazards, adopting new safeguards that could actually prevent somebody getting severely injured. So take your time and resources and put them onto the things that matter.
All right. And to put a nice little pin in this one, at the time of this recording, it's 2025. So, years from now, when people listen to this and still get value out of it, by the way, they should keep that in mind. We're coming up on July, and the October, right? Global
Last
Summit.
week of September, first week of October.
Right.
TapRooT Summit coming up
in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm going to join you on a panel you're talking about those specific cases, the serious incidents, fatalities, right? And how to unpack those. So that's sort of a shameless plug that there is a process for those. That it's a much more involved process, but it's managed. It's a manageable process, and which I like. And I have found that the other added cultural benefit of establishing all of this and having this set up that we could follow is it does alleviate a lot of the angst and anxiety and some of the emotions that are going to be present when a serious injury or fatality occurs. I've had the misfortune of being involved in 5 workplace fatality investigations in my career, and none of them, they all suck. But and I learned this from the fire department. Most people freak out or panic or have a lot of anxiety when they don't know what to do. And so if you have a process to follow, you practice it, you drill for it, you discuss it, it, that gives you something to focus on. So there's another added cultural benefit of establishing this I don't want to say rigorous, but this regimen of, okay, something happened that shouldn't have. Okay, start step 1, and then you walk through it. It does help an organization. I've seen it help alleviate a lot of that anxiety. I don't know if you have something to add to that before we wrap.
I'll agree with everything you said, and uncertainty is the enemy of action. Yeah. So if you're dealing with being uncertain, you're not taking action, which is slowing you down. And so I think we want to give people the resources and the thinking they need to take action and get people safe and get them back to work.
100%. All right. Hey, Alex, once again, I always enjoy our conversations. And I think half of our text threads should be just episodes. Just post the screenshots on there. People get a lot out of that too. But thank you again for joining me. I know we started a little early, but always a pleasure. I appreciate it. And I'll drop a link to the TapRooT Summit page where folks can get more information. I encourage everybody to go, whether you are using TapRooT or not. A lot of industry experts, most of which are customers, users of TapRooT. They're actually some of the speakers running these breakout sessions, sharing their best practices. I get a lot from that. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right. See you there.
All right. Thanks.